All right, today we're jumping into a topic that affects millions of people but is so often misunderstood: dyscalculia. Seriously, if you've ever felt like numbers are basically a foreign language, then you're in the right place. We're going to explore what it really means to have a brain that's just wired a little differently for math. Have you ever stared at a simple math problem and just felt this wave of anxiety wash over you? Or maybe you're trying to figure out a tip at a restaurant and your brain just completely freezes up. For a lot of us, that's just a frustrating moment. But what if that feeling was your reality almost all the time? Well, for a pretty significant group of kids, we're talking about 6 to 7% of elementary school children. This isn't just them being bad at math. It's a real recognized neurological condition called dyscalculia. And this is the most important part. It has absolutely nothing to do with how smart someone is or how hard they're trying. It's about how their brain is built.
So what's really going on inside the brain? Let's decode the science behind dyscalculia. Okay, so the official definition calls it a developmental disorder. What that really means is that it affects the brain's ability to learn and carry out even the most basic mathematical tasks. We're talking about the fundamentals here, like adding, subtracting, and multiplying.
So, where does this all come from? Well, scientists have pretty much zeroed in on a part of the brain called the parietal lobe. Think of it as the brain's math headquarters. The source material we're looking at calls dyscalculia both a structural and a functional disability. And get this isn't just a theory. MRI scans have actually shown that people with dyscalculia might have less gray matter in this specific area. So it's a tangible, physical difference.
Probably the easiest way to wrap your head around it is to think of it like dyslexia. We all understand that dyslexia makes reading a huge challenge. Well, dyscalculia does the exact same thing, but with numbers. Math dyslexia is a really simple and powerful way to get just how serious it is.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. It's not a one-size-fits-all condition. The source material we're pulling from actually breaks dyscalculia down into 6 different types. And looking at these really helps paint a clearer picture of all the different ways it can show up. First up, you've got verbal and praxignostic dyscalculia. With verbal, a person might be able to read and write numbers just fine, but the second a math concept is explained out loud, they just can't process it. Then there's praxignostic dyscalculia, which is different. That's when you have trouble connecting an abstract idea, like the equation 3 plus 2, to a real-world thing, like physically seeing 3 apples and 2 apples and understanding that it makes 5. Next, we have lexical and graphical dyscalculia. You can kind of think of these as 2 sides of the same coin. Lexical makes it really hard to read math symbols and equations, and graphical makes it incredibly difficult to write them down. So someone might totally understand a concept in their head, but be completely unable to put it down on paper correctly. And finally, we've got ideognostical and operational dyscalculia. The first one is a struggle with the why, understanding the concepts behind the math, how numbers relate to each other. Operational dyscalculia, on the other hand, is a struggle with the how, the actual act of doing the calculations, like addition or division, even if you understand the numbers and what you're supposed to do. It's so important to know these different types because it shows how one challenge can have so many different roots. Okay, so why does all this matter? I mean, it's just math, right? Well, not really. Because the effects of dyscalculia pop up everywhere in day-to-day life. We're talking about things like struggling to read an old-school analog clock, trying to manage a budget, or even remembering the difference between left and right. It can even make it hard to estimate speed and distance, which can be a real problem when you're driving. These are all things that a lot of us just take for granted. Now, the source for this explainer, which was a webinar, took a really specific look at managing dyscalculia through a homeopathic lens. This is a pretty unique perspective, so let's explore the approach the speakers talked about. It's really important to remember that this is just one particular viewpoint on treatment. The speakers frame their goal very, very clearly with this quote. It's not about finding some kind of cure. The whole point is to reduce the impact of the disability, to make daily life and learning just a little bit more manageable for the child. So their approach is all about linking very specific symptoms of dyscalculia to particular homeopathic remedies. It's a super individualized method that's really aimed at tackling the unique way the condition shows up in each person. So in the source webinar, they make some very specific connections. For example, they suggest a remedy called Nux vomica for kids who have trouble concentrating while doing calculations. For making what they call silly mistakes that are really driven by a fear of failure, they mention calcarea carb. Then for difficulties in math and grammar, they bring up syphilinum, And I want to note that they use some very outdated clinical language here, describing it for retarded intellect and delinquent children. Again, those are the terms from the source. Finally, a remedy called Elanthus is presented for a wider range of calculation problems. And just to be super clear, this is the specific perspective that was presented in the source webinar that we're explaining. Okay, so let's take a step back from all the details. What's the most important thing to take away from all this? What's the real big picture here? If there is one thing, just one thing that you walk away with today, I hope it's this. Dyscalculia is not a result of laziness. It's not a lack of trying. It is a fundamental neurological difference in how a person's brain processes numbers. And that is a simple but an incredibly important distinction to make. And this might be the most powerful idea of all. For people with dyscalculia, the daily struggle with numbers is, of course, immense. But so often, the bigger challenge comes from being misunderstood, from being labeled as lazy or not smart, or just bad at math by a world that just doesn't see the real cause. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. What would change if we all shifted our perspective? What if, instead of seeing a deficit or a weakness, we just saw a different kind of mind? It's a question that challenges us to look past the numbers and really see the person.